I've always been big on giving. I mean, I think I went into business because I wanted freedom, but so they say. But for me, it's just important to give. That's much more important than, and the more you give, the more that you sort of comes back to you.
Yeah. So joining me on the call today, I've got Michelle O'Hara from O Marketing. Welcome to the call, Michelle.
Thank you so much, David.
So maybe tell us a bit about what O Marketing is all about.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me today. So basically, look, O Marketing, we've been operating for 7 years, and we're a full service agency focusing on both digital and traditional marketing platforms and implementation. And really our point of difference is we love to align the business strategy with the marketing strategy and the branding strategy to make sure that our clients get good results.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Which most people would think that way, but
you would think.
Yeah. Tell me, so with the current economy, and obviously you're in Brisbane, so you're immune and COVID doesn't go there, all those sorts of things, but what are you seeing in business right now? What sort of challenges are you seeing people face with?
Great question. I think it's funny because even though we aren't affected as much as you guys, in Melbourne and Sydney, the uncertainty is still there. So people are still nervous to invest in a few things, even though business is booming. We are very lucky. The most important thing, though, we are seeing is the lack of staff shortages. Yeah. So we've been doing a lot of EVPs, employee value propositions, talking about that side of things, doing a lot of videos to attract staff and work out why people would want to work for certain companies, etc. We're noticing a lot of companies realize that they have to do the digital side of things, because they have to be found digitally, which is great. Finally, they've realized that. And just getting really, really clear on the branding and the messaging and what it is that you're selling and to whom you are selling it. So you can't be everything to everyone. Yeah. So to just get really clear on that.
Fantastic. You mentioned a fascinating topic which resonates with me. You talked about this difficulty of finding employees, and you also, before we even started the call, you mentioned how you came from a HR background. So for me, when I look at business, marketing and recruiting are exactly the same thing.
Absolutely.
It's about finding people, right? And it's about trying to find people that resonate with who you are and actually want to work with you. And the only difference is which way the money flows, but technically it's the same fishing expedition, right?
So true. And also you're so right, because one of the biggest things that has really come out of all this, because my background's also in recruitment, is the alignment of the values and the culture, which is, I'm so sure, something that you would cover in your business side of things. And people are really realizing now how important that is. Yeah.
Yeah. And so for me, the fact that you talk about marketing can be applied to recruiting as well. To me, I've been trying to explain it to people for years, and I'm saying, well, if it doesn't matter how hard the market is to find good people, they need to want to work for you. So unless you can communicate who you are, then they're just looking at the paycheck. And it's quite a different view. And even now, because it's even tougher, and I was talking to a recruiter yesterday about this, and she said, the problem is people are scared. They're not willing to move jobs. They're not willing to take the risk, because there's that old saying, bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. So if you're in the market looking for talent, they're just not moving. So you've got to have a pretty compelling reason, and probably more than a paycheck, something that inspires them. So communicating your value proposition, your message, even the reason you're in business could be the thing that draws them across the line.
Absolutely. In fact, I was just with a plumbing company, and they were talking about the fact that they need plumbers. And one of the biggest things was how much they care for their people, and they realized how busy they were, and that they said, you're all going on holidays, and I said, that's one of your points of difference, and that's the stuff you've got to share. Yes. Yeah. So excellent. It's so important.
Let me ask you, just going back, you've been in business for a while. What would you consider the best piece of business advice you've received?
You can't save the poor if you're one of them.
That's an interesting statement.
For the, I've always been big on giving. I mean, I think I went into business because I wanted freedom, but so they say. But for me, it's just important to give. That's much more important than, and the more you give, the more that you sort of comes back to you. Yeah. But one guy said that to me once, and it was something that stuck in my brain, because it's very easy to, you got to know your numbers, right? If you you can't just keep giving, you can't just keep going round and round. If you don't know your numbers, you're never going to succeed. So very important,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I tend to agree. Sometimes people think profit's a dirty word.
Oh.
And even when I hear that term, not for profit, I think to myself, how can you contribute to charity if you don't make a profit? It doesn't even make sense. The whole point of a fundraiser is to make a profit, not to be not for profit. But I think people in business are a bit ashamed of making money. They feel embarrassed about it, and it's a problem because, as you said, you can't help the poor by being one of them. You help the poor by giving stuff to them. Yeah.
Well, once you make you're right, and sometimes I think here in Australia, we get nervous talking about money. It's sort of a little bit of a taboo.
Yeah.
But it's from young, and I think it's something that COVID has really made it hit home when people found out that they didn't have the cash flows for the 3 months, that they didn't have that extra amount of money lying around to get them through.
Yeah.
So it's brought the conversation to the forefront. And I think, which is good, because it needed to, because there's too many businesses I know we go into who are not, yes, they're making millions of dollars, but if you're not walking away with any money at the end of the day, well, mate, it's not worth it.
Yeah. I often say to people, it's not about turnover, it's about leftover.
Oh, I like that.
You can keep that.
I like that one. That's good.
But look, people forget, and they talk about their revenue figures. Everyone knows what their revenue figures, but you ask them about profitability and they start scratching their heads.
Yeah.
And I say, look, that gap between what you sell and what costs you is what you get to keep. And if it's narrow, and you can tell me all the excuses, like, it's a competitive market, it's tough out there, they're just stories, right? It just means that you haven't worked out how to widen the gap. So it really is about profit.
So important. It's one of the first question we ask is, where are you now and where do you want to be? Because from a marketing perspective, how do we know what we need to achieve if we don't know where you're going, right? And so I'm amazed at how many can't answer that question. But secondly, when you say, so what do you want what does success look like? And they're like, what do you mean? And it's sort of like, well, how many clients do you need through the door? How many conversions do you need? How many do you see before you convert? All those sort of questions. And it is surprising how many people can't answer those questions, which are very important for day-to-day business, right?
Yeah, exactly. Fantastic. And Michelle, left of field, you obviously are very well educated in business, very motivated. What would you consider to be your favorite book or podcast or author?
This is always a hard one because I consume a lot of information. Right. And I've always been, like, I gave my dad Rich Dad Poor Dad as a book when I was 8, right? So that was sort of the beginning of learning.
Him.
Yes, because
did he ask you which one am I?
No, but it was the beginning. No. Yeah. Look, I love.
Let me rephrase the question. Yeah. Currently, what's your favorite?
Well, I don't really have one. I'm just consuming a lot right now. I sort of, because obviously we're all on social media and we get a lot of news, we get a lot of information. I think more importantly, what I'm loving is looking at different industries and how we can use a particular idea in one industry across to a different one.
Yeah.
So even this morning we were talking about the Canva girl and, how she's now worth 40 billion and, well done. And then we started talking about automation and processes. And then I was like, hang on, maybe we could package that up and sell that into this industry. Do you know what I mean? So that is more so going what's happening in the brain at the moment, rather than
really just that creativity and entrepreneurialism.
Yeah, across the board, and I pick things up from all over the place. I love Bob Proctor's stuff because I think, there's a lot of, we really do have to look after our mindsets and, our visions at the moment. And I've found that I know myself personally a little bit hard during COVID because usually I'm quite a planner, but I'm actually finding it quite difficult to plan a year ahead or, even 2-3 years ahead because of that uncertainty.
Yeah.
So, you know, filling your brain with lots of that sort of personal development stuff for me right now is really important as well.
Fantastic. So if you could give one piece of advice to people in business right now, what would it be?
Gosh, one piece?
Just one.
I would say look at your processes and systems and try to do it more efficiently.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, which has actually really got nothing to do with marketing, but it's probably got more to do with your stuff, actually.
It's got to do with business. I think what you're saying is right, especially when people can't see, if you can't predict the future, then you fix the current, the present, right? And I think most people, like when we talk about business planning, what's interesting is most people don't have time to plan. I'm too busy, I've got too much on. So that excuse has gone out the window for a lot of people, right? I go, well, you're not busy now, eh? You're stuck at home. So what's your excuse today, buddy? And like improving processes is something we should be doing all the time, right?
All the time. But even more so now, I think, because of the lack of staff, like I've just hired again, you know, and every week we have our little huddles, our team, you know, and we talk about how can we do this better? How can we look after our clients better? How can we, you know, and I think especially since COVID, you've just got to nail that, you know, to cut the margins if you can, to, you know, add products if you need to, all that sort of stuff, because, you know, we going forward, we just don't know what's around the corner.
Yeah, fantastic. Awesome, Michelle. We could talk all day, but we're not going to. Look, I appreciate your time, appreciate your input. Thanks so much for sharing some of the Michelle O'Hara and your secrets to success. But really appreciate your time. So thank you.
Lovely. Thanks for having me on, David.
Pleasure.
See you later.